Welcome to the Geekscape Book Club for February. Very excited to discuss our selection. Usually, I hold up my book for our visual audience, but I've loaned all my books to my co-host Eric Connor, so he can model those Price is Right style. Our own Diane Parkinson, Eric Connor, and joining us for the first time here in Geekscape Book Club is Diallo Jackson. Diallo, thank you so much for taking the time to spend time with us today.
Thank you for having me on. It's honored that you asked me to join, and looking forward to talking about these books.
Yeah, we've been doing this show for less than a year, so this was the first Black History Month where I felt there was a little bit of discussion of some other books that we can do later in the year, but this seemed to be a really good one to start with for people who are not familiar with it. Bitter Root was published by Image. I almost said Dark Horse, so I was already getting my facts. Published by Image over the last few years. I think it ended in 2019, and we kind of did this the hard way because as we're recording now, there's like an omnibus that collects everything. But we read the 3 volumes. And we do have another work that we'll talk about a little later in the show, but I want to start off talking about Bitter Root. Diallo, you had not read this before. None of us had read it before. What was your understanding of it before you read it, and just your thoughts as you started to read through Bitter Root?
Well, I had actually never heard of it before.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah. My comic book, I was born and raised in the fires of comic book doom, whatever, forged there. But around 2005, 2006, I kind of tapped out from reading them regularly, and then I kind of pay attention to what's going on, but I haven't really engaged with them like that much. And so, especially with like indie books, like every once in a while, something will come across my path and I'll read it. Someone will recommend it to me. So I had never heard of Bitter Root. But when I was presented with the list of books to read, it like that one jumped out at me immediately. Looking at the artwork and the cover, and then there's just was something that I was like, oh, I want to check this one out. And over the course of reading it, I was really like pulled into the world. The world building is really strong in it, and that's makes me want to see like an HBO Max series or something from it.
Yeah. So. Well, there was an announcement, I think, about 2 years ago. So I don't know where it stands right now, but Regina King was supposed to be adapting it for Legendary. And I believe it was as a film. Just checking my notes very quickly.
I came across that in 2021, I think it is, but I haven't seen any. When I was looking through, I did a kind of a search for a while. I didn't see any updates beyond. I think it was like May of 2021, which that's a shame. I agree. It would be a terrific HBO Max series.
Yeah, no, I think it would work really well as an ongoing series. And I want to give before we let Eric chime in, I want to give credit to David F. Walker, Sanford, Greene, and Chuck Brown. That's the creative team responsible for this. And, I think that people might be familiar with some work that they did on Power Man and Iron Fist, which is something that I think we will read later in the year. But this really stood out because, Image is hardly a small publisher at this point, but they're not Marvel, they're not DC. And most of our books have really been Marvel and DC. Most of them have honestly been Marvel. And it was interesting what you said, Diallo, because in about I think the end of 1999, I also tapped out from comics. And I, like the 16 years before that, I was reading almost everything that I could get my hands on. And then at a certain point, I don't know, you just, there's outside factors, but sometimes you're just reading these stories and you're like, I don't know, I'm just not into it right now. I'm reading a lot more stuff now because of this show. And one of my favorite things about this show is discovering something like this that I had never actually read, forcing ourselves to find time to read it. Eric, your thoughts, were you familiar with this at all? Or like Diallo and myself, this was kind of, it just jumped out at you, right?
Completely. To the point where I'm always assuming, Christian, when you assign something and I'm reading, I haven't read it, I assume like I'm the last guy at the party, the last dog to the bowl, and everyone else knows it but me, and then I feel like a fool. Like, how did I not hear about this one? Because
well, look, when we did that with Batman Year One, everybody was right to judge us for having not read it, but we just
sure.
hadn't. Yeah.
Wait, what?
I think
it's just because I was always a Marvel snob. So
one of those. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I wasn't a Marvel snob. I was more like a Marvel
as a kid.
arrogant.
As a kid, I was. Yeah. I've read a lot of stuff now. But that my upbringing, it was almost like you're betraying your team. You know what I mean? It was like it was like, oh, I heard this was good. But anyway, so about Bitterroot though, Eric, as you dive in and read it, what were some of your thoughts, big picture?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a terrific series, and I was surprised to see like it did stop, right? I mean, like we've read these 3 volumes, and it doesn't seem like there's been any new issues unless my research.
No, it seemed like they had like a finite story that they set out to tell, which I think
I mean, I'll tell you, I mean, that last scene of them showing up at a concentration camp, I'm like, okay, I'm up for this. I could handle this as the next bunch of stories. But
I mean, look, the door's open because there's plenty of spots around the world that there's that they would be well served. But
well, when I think the thing that really jumped out at me, ironically, it's like it's obviously very high concept. I love the setting of Harlem. In the 20s.
The main part of the story is in the 20s. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I have to say 1920s because we're in another 20s.
Oh yeah,
the other 20s.
Point. Yeah.
The roaring 20s as opposed to the whatever the
COVID
20s have been.
Yeah.
But you know what? The thing that really actually pulled me in, and I realized I have volume 2 in the other room because it had the family tree. And I thought like the family dynamic was actually something that was a real nice surprise. Like, you look at the cover and obviously the high concept of it all kind of jumps out at you. Sorry for the reflection of light. But really like this idea of this is like a family business, and it has torn this family apart and brought them together at the same time. And so, the all the themes that they're tackling here, and there's quite a few, are really powerful, but the family stuff was really the stuff that actually I found gave this thing a heart, and really great character work. Love the voices of them. So that's the stuff where, when you mention HBO Max series, I'm like, yeah, because this is a group I would want to hang out with. Like, this family was fascinating.
Yeah, Diallo, let's spend a little time talking about the characters because when you meet an extended family all at once, it might take a little bit to find the different voices, but I feel like the characters are so unique and well defined. Especially Berg overusing the big words at every chance. I thought that basically the first page that he's on, he's already using what we used to call 10-cent words, but 10 cents isn't really a lot of money anymore. So they're like $10 words. As we get to meet the family, what do you think what were your thoughts about how the character development seemed to have been done so well ahead of time that it didn't take a couple issues to get to know the characters? At least it didn't for me.
Yeah. I mean, you got who they were almost immediately. You said Berg's use of the big words. Like, I have to admit, a part of me felt like it was a little bit tedious, but at the same time, in a writing sense, it's the perfect way to establish who the character is. Like, if it was live action, it wouldn't have doubled down as much on that. But it was a great way to show.
I hope not.
It was a great way to show like who he is and what he's about. And obviously it's it could fall into parody a little bit, but it was actually showing how intelligent he actually was in relation to his, like, we would assume the big guy isn't smart, but he actually is likely the smartest. And then what Blink was her name? Was her
that was her nickname,
yeah. Like she she came across as like the strong, you're gonna be the leader type right away. Their interaction, they're like kind of bickering or sniping it at each other. showed a familiarity that they had with each other. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it. It kind of reminds me of like I get in trouble for saying this a lot. Jonathan, he makes fun of me, but there's a Marvel series from the mid-90s called Clandestine,
Yeah,
and it
sure.
actually gave me shades of that, where it was like this sort of like dysfunctional family that they all had this history, backstory with each other, and the way that they talk to each other, and it like the way they talk to each other is different based on their relationship with each other. So some people are okay, other people aren't okay with each other, but they all kind of like make it work, so
Sure. Yeah. No, I think that the large family dynamic, I think, can make any kind of storytelling relatable. A large African American family, anybody who has a big family, they're like, yeah, I see that dynamic. My Big Fat Greek Wedding wasn't successful because only Greek people went to see it. Anybody with a big family, they're like, oh yeah, of course. So
right.
whenever you get that sort of thing, you can relate to it. And what I liked was, as other characters popped in as the volumes went along, it's like, oh, well, this person actually has an issue with that person, and it's different than their issues with this person. So it's like there was a family tree, which is very useful, but we could have used like a gripe or argument tree of like what everybody's fighting about to keep track of what it was.
I could use that with my in-laws, honestly.
No,
they're not going to see this, right?
No comment. Mine might be in the house right now.
Well, a lot of some of their gripes were based on actually plot points, right? So
yeah,
that were little mysteries that were revealed like down the road. So I thought that was like having the family tree come at the end of the book, let me kind of discover the story initially, and then I got to go back and kind of place where everybody was at after I had been introduced to them. So I like that the family tree came later, personally.
Yeah. Eric, I know that the Baja men are being represented there at your home because we know who let the dog out. But
too soon.
Sorry, I know. We're still waiting for the follow-up hit. I'm sure that here on Geekscape, Matt Kelly has done the Baja Men for One Hit Thunder, but if he hasn't, this is my appeal to him to do it sometime soon, because we've given them 23 years. I think the follow-up isn't coming, but in any case, very off topic. But Eric, in terms of, for people who don't know, Eric is a professor, an instructor at the New York Film Academy. So when you're sort of instructing in terms of creating a story, I think flashbacks are something that you need to use carefully, but I think in this story, they do such a great job of really filling in the story. And we get to see, Ma at I don't know, it was like 60, 80 years earlier, you get to actually see some of these characters in action. Give me your thoughts on the usage of, there were a couple of time jumps as the story progressed.
Yeah, I thought they did a nice job actually of helping us kind of understand when they were jumping, why they were jumping, and adding, really choosing their spots, like, right, finding moments that was going to add to the drama or tension, add to our understanding. And I like that they didn't lead with those moments either. Like, you could have had, I mean, I was thinking, bring up HBO Max, I was thinking The Watchmen, and the prologue of The Watchmen is a famous, infamous Tulsa massacre, Black Wall Street. And they name check that in the storytelling, but they hold off on sort of taking us there. That, and they also, the Red Summer of 1919, which was
1919, yeah,
like throughout the country. And so I think they were smart about like not leading, like you were saying before, about like not leading with the family tree, not leading with like these moments of history that are sort of this like, stain on this country. And I think like allowing us to kind of get in with the characters, get in with a bit of the action too. Because they also, I feel like I didn't have to wait necessarily too long for like monsters to appear, and then it gives us some context of who they are, like their relationship with this family, or how the family has dealt with this for years. But I think it was smart. Yeah, it's like using voiceover, using flashbacks. They're all potential crutches. I mean, literally, I have a lecture I just called like, when to use a crutch.
Yeah.
But it can add so much to the storytelling if done right. If it's not just a kind of a filler, which sometimes under lesser hands it might be. But I thought here it really was smart when they gave him to us, and clarify things. It was fun seeing characters, like Etta. And by the way, you're saying universality. I had a grandma Etta, who was not as cool as this grandma Etta, with all due peace and love to her, though she was a Mets fan. So I have to give.
Well,
so
she fought off a lot of demons in her own way.
Oh, very much so. So like I think they were smart. They didn't use them too much. There wasn't necessarily massive threads. I mean, one thing that kind of jumped to me, honestly, the Quantum Mania connection. Weirdly enough, like as I'm reading this and having just seen Quantum Mania and the idea of parents being stuck somewhere else and having to find them, I was thinking like, oh yeah, Quantum Mania sort of missed the boat a little bit about the emotional side of what that means. Like if you lost a parent and then if we're able to reunite with them after an extended period of time. Like I thought this really actually developed that one thread quite nicely in a way that it's like into Ant-Man 2 and the recent one. I'm like, yeah, I didn't really get into the messy emotions of that so well.
No spoilers. I haven't seen it yet. So
okay, yeah, it's okay because so far what he said refers.
I get it.
Earlier Ant-Man, Michelle Pfeiffer being left behind.
Yeah.
It's it is an interesting point. And I think that they, on the pages of comic book, you're able to spend a lot more time and stuff like that. Like we were talking about the grudges and the gripes against family members being very real. Like, hey, you left me there, and the limbo realm that I'm not going to try to pronounce, but I probably should, but I won't. But Diallo, let's talk about sort of the big concept, this idea that we first meet the Janu and then there's other offshoots of them, but this idea of, the manifestation of basically evil hatred can turn people into actual demons instead of just metaphorical, I mean, at one point Maya just alludes to, that guy in Germany with the book, and about, so it's sort of an interesting way to have a literal manifestation of the hatred. And I think just dealing with this African-American family, dealing with this story, with these characters, I don't want to have this come out the wrong way, but it's like such a simple idea, but in the way where it's so accessible and so approachable, it's like brilliant. You're like, oh, that's genius. That it's like, no, people are turning into actual demons. Here's a literal serum where we can try and help them get back to being the good people they were,
Yeah, I think, it did come across a little bit to me, like kind of like how you described, like, and I don't mean it in a like a pejorative way, but like a little simple, it's sort of like a direct allegory, but it like needed to be that, and they with the character, what's I forget his name, the white character from the like
Johnny
the clan,
Ray, I think was his name.
Yeah. He like
Johnny Ray Knox.
Johnny Ray. So he like expands upon that idea, which that gave that concept more complexity than it initially had. So you actually, because there's a part of you that's kind of like, well, why isn't everybody like that then? And it just shows that like not everybody's like that. And he happens to be a character that he was partaking in a lynching, but then he explains how he doesn't even really know how he got there. He didn't want to be a part of it. There's room for him to actually like it didn't go through, so there's room for him to actually not cross that line, and then he ends up being the sidekick to the what's his I kept calling him Blade in my head, but the the character that he ends up kind of like being the sidekick to for a while, and like the
Right.
his Friday. So it was yeah, it was like it was a good concept, and then they layer that a little bit later with the whole idea of sorrow and giving us a different degree of what monsters can be. So, I mean, it's a good manifestation of human emotions.
Yeah, I mean, to add that layer to it, that it wasn't the same cure for the sorrow as it was for the hatred. And I thought that I agree that the Johnny Ray Knox character, we meet him. He's at I guess an attempted lynching. He's in a Klan robe, so it is not a character that you think is going to be endearing towards you. And I did like that I actually forget which one it was, but there's a member of the family that's like, yeah, I got no time for this white boy because, he and it's just like, well, yeah, not everybody should accept him. But I thought it was his journey was really interesting because I think, you can see, although as hard as it might be to believe, 100 years later, the idea that somebody gets caught up in the idea with, like, oh, my friends are in this group, and it's the Klan, but it's like, well, I'm in the Elks Club. Is this like that? And it's like, no, it's a little different, but come to a meeting, and you can see how it would happen. Look, Johnny Ray Knox, probably not the smartest character we've ever read in a comic book. You can see how he would just kind of go with the crowd, but he's like, look, that's not me. That's not who I am. And I don't know. I thought that, and I thought that it was an interesting way to add that, to have this character. And, it's nice that he, gives a sacrifice, but then, then they go to see his family, and then there's, the mom's like harboring a demon. So it's, I thought that we got a lot more mileage out of that character. I thought that at the end of that issue, it was like, well, oh, he's back. It was kind of interesting. What do you think about that, Eric? Sort of the surprise of, I like using the term as sort of like the Friday, the sidekick, that this was the go-to guy really for about half of the series, I think.
Yeah, I agree. When you first read it, you're not thinking, "Oh, what this series needs is more of him." More double down on Knox, please, on Johnny Ray. I think.
Which, by the way, for a movie, that just the name, you just makes me think like, oh, shouldn't Johnny Knoxville play that guy? Because I can see it, But anyway, what were you going to say, Eric?
He might be a little old and overly concussed at this point for that role, unfortunately. You bring up, this great point too about the idea of like here's the Klan and they're all demons. Like, I agree at some points, so you're like, oh, it's a little broad, a little on the nose, but I think there is something to be said, right? The characters who are almost like bear witness to those moments and allow things to happen. I mean, that's the thing. It's like there's those, like the levels of evil, like the levels, like have you been infected or at your, what was it? I'm trying to remember the comparison. It was like either it kind of comes from the outside in or the inside out, meaning you're a human who's been infected, or were you always a devil who's basically trying to be human? And I think that was an interesting concept. I kind of wish, if anything, they got a little more into, I mean, maybe if you set the story now versus then, maybe if this was in 2020 and 23, and you're dealing then with if you wanted to go with the metaphor, then you begin to ask questions about, you could get into politics even if you wanted to. Yeah. I mean, it could become something where then it becomes less sort of like someone's an evil skinhead or an evil Klansman versus like, what does it mean almost to be like a passive racist, and allow things to happen. I think that might be really interesting to explore. And that's where I think the Johnny Lee Knoxville character is basically like important, because there's so many people like that who do sort of allow things to happen. This is history over and over again. It's not just about the people with the biggest guns and the loudest megaphone, but it's also about those who either turn a blind eye or just kind of go along for the ride. And so I think
Right.
that's where he is
You
an
know,
interesting
I
character
mean,
to explore.
you alluded to it earlier, but you know, Nazi Germany doesn't happen if
Right.
enough people don't just turn a blind eye and look the other way. You know,
Yeah.
if more people speak up. I think in terms of setting it in the past, I think it's better to have sort of that, you know, step removed. It's sort of like how with the film and the series, MASH was an allegory for Vietnam, but you didn't want to try
During
and tell a
Korea.
story about Vietnam, so you put it in
Yeah.
Korea. So this is like, yeah, we could tell the story now, but let's sort of deal with some more familiar times and sort of, you know, a spot about 100 years ago. So I think that it would be interesting. I mean, they can certainly tell more of these stories, and if they did do, as Diallo said, like an HBO Max series, I hope it wouldn't be a mini series. I think you can really explore, you know, even just the decades shortly thereafter, you know, I mean, much less getting up to now. I want to talk about a character who we also really see, I think, a much more complex arc than I thought we were going to get, which is Dr. Sylvester. Let's talk a little bit about him, Diallo. Basically, he's sort of the big bad of the first volume, but then he's really along with them in the second and third. You know, I mean, he realizes that he's basically doing the work of the devil for all intents and purposes. How do you think that the creative team handled the progression of Dr. Sylvester deal?
I mean, my impression was that the intention all along was for him to be sympathetic, like to where he ended up. Because when you first realize what he's up to at the very beginning, it like he was softer. There was a kindness to the way he spoke, and so I definitely knew he wasn't like the bad guy, even though he was kind of behind what was going on. So yeah, and then there was that sense of the redemption and being the active force for change towards the end, the pivotal turn that like he with the knowledge that he can glean. I think it was from the book. Was that the towards the end?
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a classic, it's like a postmodern classic. I kind of think of it as where we've grown up with all these villains, but then in this postmodern world, we have like Magneto or Black Adam, all these characters, Harley Quinn, that are starting to be looked at as sort of heroes in their own way, and not even like it's a step beyond anti-hero. It's like they actually are a force for good and change. They don't embody the light, but they actually are on the side of light. So we're
No,
just
but
re-examining those characters.
it's actually the comparison that I was going to make is, you know, Magneto has this tortured backstory, which of course we talked about in our previous episode where we focused on God Loves Man Kills with Chris Claremont. And you know, having spent time in a concentration camp, watching, I believe, his wife and both children die, you know, Magneto is a sympathetic character, despite the fact that, you know, on his resume is founder, comma, Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, you know. So there's moments, you know, there's different ways that we express our dissatisfaction with the world. But yeah, I think that you know, it's interesting that you mentioned the book, because it reminded me that there's so much stress, and I think it's from the sort of the standalone the summer special, where we see Berg is very young and he has a stutter, and sort of like the weapons to give him are the books, and the idea of the power of books and the written word, I think in a comic book is a great thing to have. And I think sort of having this story be, you know, a little simple, easily accessible, is because, you know, while this is not, I have a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old, this is not a book for them. You can still see, you know, middle school, junior high kids. It's like, this is a way to kind of understand the world in a way of like, well, you know, people have demons inside, and in this story, they literally have it. So I think it's a nice touch to kind of, this written word reminding you of the power of the written word in general. I thought was a nice touch. But I wanted to pivot to Eric about Dr. Sylvester. Wanted to give you a chance to give some thoughts on him.
Sure. Well, I think those early scenes were really interesting with like him and was it Nightdale?
Yeah.
Yeah, their bond was really interesting, and it's like how gentle they were with each other, and then you would see these forms they would become, and so I think a lot of times with these, these baby face turns, to coin a wrestling expression, you need to have like some kind of an emotional connection with those characters. So, like Magneto losing his family, you can understand how that might make him pivot one way or the other. And so I think here, like the moment where she's killed, you could see like how that, whatever sort of like civility he had and education he had, like sort of went by the wayside for a bit, although he did again eventually come back around. But I think it works because of those early scenes, because we see that they're sort of like the Jekyll and Hyde of them, and kind of haunted by what they become, not enjoying the freedom of it, but rather treating it like this curse. And so even what they're trying to do in those early chapters are sort of like dealing with this curse that they didn't ask for. And then, of course, finding out even their connection is rooted in tragedy. So I thought all those moments really played so that his shift didn't feel forced. It didn't feel phony. It felt kind of organic and natural, considering where he began.
Yeah, no, I think that it's, look, it's 15 individual issues with a special thrown in. So you really get a lot of time to, study the arc. And it's why we keep going back to the idea of this working better as like a streaming series, is that to tell the story in a movie, you really have to, you spend a lot of time fighting demons, and a little bit of time getting to know the people doing it.
Sure.
So it's, it's a great thing about television, but even better than television is just the amount of words you can fit on a single page of a comic book in terms of just the development that it gives you. I would hope that if these characters all get brought to the screen, it happens in such a way where we're able to get to know them as well as we did here in the book. Now, Eric, I know that you gravitated towards some of the side characters, the little creatures and pets and things, but one in particular you said to me.
Yeah, because just when you think this story is pretty serious, the themes here are not small, and then all of a sudden you have something that easily could have run right out of like any of the Star Wars films, except it wouldn't have been so steampunky. The idea of a dog monster with a steampunk angle is something I'm here for. I don't know if you did a live action version of the show. I don't know where that guy fits in, but I want them to find a way.
You want them to find, look, to your point about Star Wars, you could see him, looking up in the cantina, after, Ben Kenobi slices off that guy's arm. He's like, and then he just goes back to finishing his drink or whatever steampunk. Yeah. It's a little bowl of something. But I think it's interesting that there were these creatures that also kind of helped, they helped spot the Janu, and then also they were really like allies to our primary family, which I read that, here we are half an hour in, I read it as Sangarai, but maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong in my head. That is the problem with comic books, in that you might, like, I think that's how you said the name, but I'm not sure, so. But if anybody had either of you had a different pronunciation, please let me know. But I think that it's a good concept. It's like Eric alluded to, it's a big concept put in kind of a smaller package with great characters. And there is the supernatural element of dealing with demons and spending time in kind of the netherworld and, the land of the dead. And my favorite thing was when they started to go like, well, we have these things that show up in Chinatown. We have the same problem. And then, the different variations that are like, they're not the same demons, but they might as well be. And the idea that, when they have the meeting of like the proverbial meeting of the 5 families, I thought that was one of those interesting things where everybody's like, yeah, but this isn't really our problem. And again, the metaphor is a little strong, but it's the idea of like, why should I worry about the demons in your neighborhood? I've got the demons in my neighborhood, but it's the same demon, And I don't know if Diallo, if you felt like that was, again, oversimplification, or did that work to kind of, address the, especially in a melting pot like New York City, a century ago, all the little different neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's funny, not so much. It felt actually, I felt their interpersonal conflict more than I did the broader like idea that they were trying. So I actually really believed that they butted heads, if that makes any sense, like on a personal level. So but obviously, yeah, they you saw that they didn't want to deal with what was going on in the other neighborhoods, but really it's like, again, they gave a good sense of there being a history to it felt like there was some kind of incident or something that was specific that prevented them from wanting to do that, and I don't know like what that was, but yeah, that part didn't seem too much of a direct allusion to me, but I enjoyed it. It made sense. I like the idea of all the different especially the Chinese version of Blink, kind of having the same struggle.
And talk about, by the way, that the 2 of them would be, I mean, would they partner up, and it's kind of like, we'll take care of yours and we'll go back to my part of town.
Yeah, where's the spin-off series? I mean,
that feels like it's ready to be like written today. I mean,
this is where Image isn't Marvel. They haven't already, done multiple sequels to this and spin-offs and But Eric, to that point, sort of, give me your thoughts on the dealing with the very similar but not exactly the same threats, depending on which neighborhood you were in.
Sure. I mean, I guess it's also too like the classic kind of immigrant's tale. Like, you come to this country with whatever you might have had back home. Oftentimes you don't get to bring it with you. And so now you're starting
please don't break into Somewhere Out There from American Tail. All right.
Well, I was thinking of doing Immigrant Song by Led Zeppelin.
Led Zeppelin. Oh, well, that's fine. Yeah, that's not going to
work. Papa? Wait, I have that hat in the next room.
No. You don't need your 5-hole hat.
Oh, no, we need it. We need visual aids. So the idea of like parallels, I think, is so powerful, in storytelling. And, it's why we study history. It's like you see the stuff plays out over and over again, just with new characters, new names. You alluded to before Big Fat Greek Wedding, like that's why that thing played so huge. Still one of the biggest romantic comedies of all time, because you just change a couple of the dishes, a couple of the words, and it's basically your family in some capacity. And so I think it was smart that they alluded to it. They didn't lean in too hard, but it is funny. They set up themselves to really expand this universe well, and it's just I don't know, the inner workings of this label, like this imprint, why they wouldn't think to say, okay, there's more storytelling you could easily do with Bitterroot.
Yeah, but as big as Image has become in the last 30 years, I mean, they don't put out anywhere near as many books as probably even as Dark Horse, actually. I mean, I think that there's only so much bandwidth to, push out new books, but I think it's certainly welcome. The fact that they've just put out the new omnibus will probably help the interest, and maybe they've got plans, maybe it's part of like a reset. One of the things you sent me, Eric, and I'm glad you took a picture of this, because I forgot to grab these before I loaned you my books, but there's a number of these throughout the volumes, and I think that they existed as ads. This one, obviously, it's for our audio audience. It is a an homage to the Do the Right Thing poster, and I just think it's such and there's a whole bunch of them throughout the entire book, but I loved these little touches like this. And was there a reason why you highlighted the Do the Right Thing one, Eric, or was it just as simple as like, oh, this was probably the best of the bunch of them?
I mean, it's really clever. I mean, that's one very basic thing. It's like I saw that and it brought a big smile on my face. And I really like too, even the second collection, and I'm not sure how it would have played out in the comic books, but they almost like these micro stories they did along the way too, where they kept saying the end. So I wasn't sure if that was something when it was originally released as a series of individual comics, how that played out.
Yeah, well, the volume 2 starts with the summer special, which was a bunch of short stories.
Right.
So
okay.
I thought
with a lot of different artists too, which I thought was a nice touch as well.
No, it was definitely, and that was the thing too. Some of the variant covers that they put in there were the only one I remember is Mike Mignola, but there were some like really standout. There's a Scotty Young kind of a silly one, but there were some really big standouts, I thought, of well-known comic book
was
luminaries, if you will.
There was that Akira one.
Yeah,
I don't know who the artist was, but that made me stop and look because it jumped out to me as Akira. But then I was like, wait a minute, like what's going on here? And then I noticed it was sort of like a steampunk bicycle and that kind of stuff. So I thought that was cool.
Eric, you've got something to hold up. So that one was great. Yeah,
that's what I like too. It got also a little bit of Miss Marvel vibes from it as well.
Yeah, that's a great call. Yeah, that was, I remember that was the Juneteenth variant for one of the issues, and there's a
made me want to buy the omnibus. Provided.
Well, yeah, because you have to give those all back to me. So
I do.
You don't
renter was never a keeper, even though I gave you that mug. You never said, "Oh yeah, hold on to it as long as you need."
Thank you. And your grandmother would appreciate my home run apple mug.
Etta Cohen would have been very happy to have that.
You sent me a few more images, and I know this was something that we were just talking about. Blink and her Chinatown counterpart.
I love that one image, like the kind of the hero shot, low angle, looking up at them with the gnarliness on the bottom of the screen, at the bottom of the frame. But the two of them, that's a pairing. I hope at some point they give us more of them.
Yeah, no, exactly. You just you wonder what kind of plan there is, and I agree with you, Eric. It was like that news article that was from 2021. You're like, okay, but what's going on now? And before we shift over to talk about our other book, there was one more image you sent me, so I want to give you a chance for our visual audience, but for our audio audience, maybe take a moment and describe what this one was and what made it speak to you.
Oh, going back to Grandma Etta, I think she just really grabbed me a lot as a reader, and I think she's died because she's in she's visited the other realm. And I'll just read this. I thought you were dead, and what if I was? Whatever happened to letting tired souls rest in peace, young woman? And pardon me. And do you know how hard it is to cross over to visit with the ancestors? It ain't like going to the Bronx.
Yeah, that was very funny. I enjoyed that panel as well. And definitely Ma Etta really stands out amongst all the characters. But I mean, I was, I knew that there was a lot of acclaim for this story, and I knew that it was very well received, but that didn't mean that I still wasn't surprised at how right away the story grabbed me and, really, held me over 3 volumes / 15 issues in a special. So, I think hopefully people are much more aware of this, with a new fancy volume on comic book stores, bookshelf stores, but most people get their books online now, I guess. But I bought these at a comic book store, so I always felt like I was like my money was going to a better place than if I had bought them from Amazon or even Barnes and Noble. So, but I feel like I'm much better informed of what's out there in terms of different kinds of storytelling, and I hope I hope that conversationally I'm able to convince people either with this episode or just talking about this in the future. Before we end, though, Diallo, I wanted to talk to you about another book that you had recommended. It was by a friend of yours, and and it's called Infinitum, an Afro-futurist tale. And yeah, exactly. Yeah, and Eric, let me guess, that's in the other room too, isn't it?
No, it is not.
Look at you, but that's all right, because so eventually it'll come up. There it is. So I've got it for people to see. And I mean, so talk a little bit about it. I guess Tim Fielder is someone that you know, Diallo, right?
Yeah. I kind of met him through a friend of mine that I went to college with. It turns out he is an incredible artist. She's a great playwright, actually. And I met him over the years, watched some of the stuff he did, and I think it was at the beginning, sort of like the beginning parts of the pandemic. I knew he was working on this, and it came out, and purchased it, and was kind of blown away. The other book that he did before was a book called Maddie's Rocket, and it was a little bit more, like The Rocketeer, but like Afro futuristic background. But this story kind of takes that idea of like Afro futurism, Afrocentrism. It actually goes way back in the past. Maybe like high science fiction mixed with fantasy at some parts. Tells an entire tale. And to me, like after you get to the end, it actually turns into like sort of like classic sci-fi that I think of. Like when I read stories like short stories like I Have No Mouth Yet I'm a Scream, or I Am Legend. Like it has that, gave me that sense of like being a classic sort of like idea of science fiction with a twist, kind of a twist at the end that you're not quite expecting.
Yeah, I think it was really interesting because I didn't really know anything about it. You had mentioned it, and I was like, great, I'd be interested in reading that, and talking about it on the show. And I didn't realize that it was going to really touch on a number of genres, from sort of like Conan the Barbarian style feeling to the most futuristic future sci-fi, and just an interesting concept of this character who can't die. It's a concept of we did the original first 20 issues of Sandman last year, and there's a character that on a whim Dream just decides to make him immortal, that no matter what happens he's not going to die. And so this carries that, instead of giving let's visit him over 100 years, let's visit him over, I think it was like 150,000 years as it by the time that it ended. And it's a really interesting idea to have one person live through that much history. And the first thing that you realize is that the connections you make with people that are so important to all of our lives are so fleeting when you live that long, that you have long stretches where you're like, why should I even bother? And I think that we really get to see so many different perspectives on world history, but then it goes into sci-fi. And like you said, Diallo, I thought it was a really interesting turn that I didn't really see coming. I'll highlight some of the images that I could get from the publisher online, but the most starting point is just how beautiful the artwork is inside this volume. Eric, I wanted to give you a chance to talk a little bit about Infinitum.
Yeah, well, I was going to say thank you, actually, because I found this to be such an incredible read. And it's interesting, too, because for those who are watching this, like sometimes the panels are just one image, one very large, beautifully rendered image with a little bit of text. And then other times it will stop and almost be like a first-person narrative, first-person point of view, almost like a letter being written. And this thing spans, I mean, it's like it spans the history of the world, past, present, future. And there was one line I grabbed, I thought was really just like the whole point. I run light years from my former life, and the same fate stalks me here. I thought there was something about that that's like was so powerful that like, in essence, like, you know, he's it's the record that just keeps skipping on the same note, and yet the note was so beautifully rendered through so many different incarnations, you know. And so to be clear, he did all the art on this as well, right? Not just the text.
Yeah,
Fielder?
he's the artist and the writer. Yeah,
That's
he.
a heck of a
I don't.
mind he's got.
Yeah, I don't
Yeah.
know what to say other than like I've seen him at it for a while. He actually gave a TED talk some years ago about Afrofuturism, TEDx talk, and yeah, it's been interesting to watch the direction he's going. I've seen some artwork that he's working on for a new book. It looks science fiction based, so looking forward to seeing that one come out as well.
Yeah,
The thing
he
I
had like an
like the
oh, sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was just saying, one thing I came across was he had an exhibit in New York that was
Yeah.
that, and I was really when I was reading about it, it sounded terrific. I was like, oh, I wonder if he'll ever come out to LA. But it was it 30 years of Afrofuturism, comics, music, animation,
Yeah.
decapitated chickens,
Yeah.
heroes, villains, and Negroes. I'm like, how did I miss that? I don't think I've been in New
Yeah.
York City for a while, so I
Yeah,
don't think I
sure.
would have been there when it was there. But I do hope, but maybe you could put a little bug in his ear to bring that out to LA.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I actually tried to get him to make it out to the LA Comic Con, but he wasn't able to make it this past year. And then maybe he'll be able to make it out to San Diego and bump into him there. But yeah, one of the things I like about his story and Bitterroot as well is that it centers Black characters, and not just the characters but their experience. So it doesn't do a lot of there's a lot of narratives that try to like service lots of different perspectives, I think, and it doesn't bother with that, so it kind of stays true to itself. And it's like I took time to like look at like the makeup of the background characters sometimes, and like for the most part they are all Black, and it's sort of like normalizing that, saying like it's okay to have stories with just Black people, and not that it's discriminatory or anything like that, but just sometimes that's all. Like if it was a book that was set in Asia, I would expect all Asian people to be there and have it told from Asian perspectives. And sometimes we get these stories where they'll have that perspective, but then they'll have a pivotal like white character in there that tends to be like the white savior, and we don't get that here. And I just really enjoyed that piece, and Bitterroot does that as well. So I just it's just in some ways it was refreshing to see that. It just felt organic and true, you know. And so it for Infinitum, I actually, where Bitterroot, I would like to see it as like a HBO Max series. Infinitum felt to me like it could be like a really cool, beautiful short story, like a film short, 20 minutes or something, and just focusing on the beauty of the art and have someone kind of telling the story with voiceover.
I would love to see it animated in the same style as
the
book. I think that would be great. And it's I agree with Eric. It's sort of like I had never heard of this book, but you mentioned it, and I was so glad to have had the opportunity to read it and sort of go on that journey. And it's like it could be a fast read, but then you really want to take your time and look at all the artwork. So it's like it's a little bit of a massive book, but I don't know. It was like $20. It was
I was about to pitch the cost. I just bought it on Amazon.
It's for a nice hardcover with beautiful, first of all, really nice paper, but that is important to highlight the wonderful artwork. And so let me obviously Eric and I had very different experiences and outlooks on the world. I just sort of wonder sometimes Diallo, for you, if say that there was a point when you were younger, if you had found both of these books, would they have spoken specifically towards your experience because of the fact that there are so many Black characters? And I mean, I do you feel like there would have been a connection that you said you stopped reading comic books in 2005. By then they were fairly inclusive, not as much as I would say as they are now, but certainly more than when I first started reading comics in 1983. But do you feel like these would have stood out, let's just hypothetically say 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if there was something like this being offered at that time, do you think it would have had a greater impact on you when you were younger?
I think definitely. I talk about this a lot when I actually did a panel on like Black representation of the Black characters at LA Comic-Con. And one of the things for me in relation to comic books is that growing up, as much as I loved all of them, there was always like a absent piece. Like, so I rarely saw characters that looked like me. And then when they did show up, they tended to be, like in a, caricature, sometimes like a stereotype adjacent. I was talking with somebody just the other day about the 90s, early 90s, speaking of Image, that first group of Image artists. They were good enough to put in a bunch of African American characters, but they like like 2 or 3 of them all like were HIV positive. And so
Oh, wow.
so it was just like there's nothing wrong with them being HIV positive, but it shows me what like subconsciously you kind of associate with these people that you're putting in your stories. So when you have a book like Bitterroot and Infinitum it's like they're being told they're about Black people, but they're by Black people. That's like the part. Because then you avoid those unfortunate like traps that you might fall into if you're not naturally a part of that group. So I definitely would have been, I would have enjoyed seeing something like that as a kid. But then I don't know, but the experience that I went through as a kid kind of like makes me make the stuff I make now, where I like I try to put that stuff into the works that I do in a organic way. So it might not have gone down the path I have with my own content. So.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because I think that, especially when you look in the 70s, my familiarity is mostly with Marvel, so I'm going to use these as an example, but you had this explosion of female characters and minority characters, and we can celebrate Luke Cage, Power Man, but then if you read like the first comic, it's embarrassing is clearly written by a white guy. I'm pretty sure he calls someone a jive turkey. I'm almost positive he calls someone a jive turkey. Right. And it's just like, yes, part of that is being dated. It's what, 40 plus years old, but also just the way everybody talks. You're like, oof, but it's great character. Later interpretations. I loved the series, the Luke Cage series that we got. And, very selfishly, my favorite is the episode where Danny Rand comes to visit him up in Harlem. And I was like, I always wanted that Power Man and Iron Fist series that we never actually quite got. And maybe we will get in the future. But, I think the key is these stories being told by creators who can relate to the experience. When my wife, who's Chinese American, saw Shang-Chi with me, she says, like, this is great. But boy, do I wish that they made movies like this when I was a kid, and it's you can't really do anything about what went before, but it's great to see that there are these opportunities, for creators. And I believe that Bitterroot came about after they had, got some, I don't want to say clout, but some renown for having worked on Power Man and Iron Fist. So it's great that a publisher like Image and, Dark Horse will do this to some extent. And there's plenty of other Boom Studios, plenty of smaller publishers who will take a chance on a story that, look, you could see pitching Bitterroot to a big corporate comic book company that's tied to, whether it be Warner Brothers, whether it be Disney, and being like, yeah, this sounds good, but I just don't think people will buy it. And sometimes it's like, well, if you let people find it, I'm pretty sure they're going to buy it, So, but Diallo, I was very glad that we were able to talk about all of this. And thank you so much for joining us. But I want to give you a chance to let people know where they can find more of you and possibly get in touch with you.
You can find me out in the ether doing my thing. I have a fantasy audio book / podcast called The First Noel Chronicles that I've been re-recording lately and re-putting up the episodes and doing new versions of those. You can check out my website, First Noel Chronicles. And I also have a comic book called Angela and the Dark that is starts a young Black character, which kind of my desire to have more authentic Black characters that I was talking about before was that was what it was born from.
Sure.
Yeah. And then I just started doing a podcast called Actually. You can find that out in the interwebs as well. And
you actually got a little garbled. You were a little garbled right as you said the name of the podcast. So I want to give you a chance to actually say the name of the podcast.
Yeah, it's called Galactica Actually. So, and we talk about the reimagined Battlestar Galactica series. We're going episode by episode. So just started it. And we just did the fourth episode, I think. So. That's a
great idea. I love that. And, getting to spend so much time revisiting that series. And anytime I have an excuse to rewatch anything with Dean Stockwell is
gonna
be right there for me.
Absolutely.
For here on Geekscape Book Club, next month, Sunday, March 26th, we will tying into the upcoming Kang Dynasty and the Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. We're going to do a very recent volume. I believe this is from 2021. So some of the newest work, Bitterroot probably up to now was the newest thing that we had read. But Kang the Conqueror, Only Myself Left to Conquer is the collection that we will talk about next month. And really, we're going to be spending a lot of time with Kang. So we want to give people a chance to read what Ian Kerner seemed to think that was the starting point. And if you're a big Geekscape fan, Ian does all the movie specials with Jonathan London here at Geekscape. And I texted Jonathan. I'm like, can you ask Ian what we should read? That's a good Kang story. And I actually thought it was going to be something from, I don't even know. I mean, the character's been around for more than 50 years. And it was something really recent. Seemed like a good starting point. So I'm excited to read that next month. And, looking forward to putting together the panel to discuss on that. So look for us on March 26th. Eric, thank you for your time as well. Please let people know where they can find you.
Sure. You can catch me at Count Eric Connor over at Twitter and Instagram. And the documentary I helped produce, Other Voices, is hanging out on Amazon Prime. So if you want to give that a watch,
it's on Amazon Prime in the way where if you have Prime, you can watch it. It's not an add-on now, right?
I believe so. Although it might have shifted. I know those don't tend to always stay that way. So
right.
It might cost you $5-6, but I'll pay you half of it if you don't like.
He'll pay you back in Mets home run apple.
In Mets home run mugs. Yeah, I'm a fair man, but yeah, and thank you again. Fun thing about this book club is increasing my diet healthily with books that I hadn't read previously, and in some cases had a very long time to read, and I didn't get around to it. So thank you, Christian, for making me hold my feet to the fire and increasing my comic book lore.
Well, I made it as easy as possible. I said, meet me for coffee. I'm going to give you these 4 books. Read them over the weekend. Not quite.
Really aggressive, actually, but
Very
it
aggressive.
worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Eric, before we head out, is that a Shogun Warrior on the floor
Yes, it
behind
is.
you?
Good eye. Yes, that is an original from
Yeah.
Good eye.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
Can I borrow your
I've been looking
glasses?
at that for the last 30 minutes.
Yeah, and it's big actually. It's
I used to
it's
have one of those. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
and thanks to the fact that my mom never threw out anything, also meant that it took me half a year to clear out her house after she passed, but it meant I got to bring that beautiful boy
You got to
back
bring
home
a
with
Shogun
me.
Warrior home.
Oh yeah.
Well, thank you to all the Shogun Warriors out there for joining us over the last hour plus. We look forward to talking Kang with you next month. If you would like to follow me on Twitter and Instagram, I am at ChristianDMZ. Please subscribe to my podcast, The Blattcast, BLADTCAST. Eric is a part of our big Quantum Mania, basically cobbling together 3 separate conversations for a massive 3-hour episode. If you really want to deep dive on Quantum Mania, not you, Diallo, you haven't seen it yet. We talk about all the spoilers, but people who have seen it that want to hear some different opinions on that. And also later this week, we'll be recording something for Geekscape, so keep an eye out for it in the future. But I'll be doing a interview with Kenneth Johnson, who created the original V miniseries, and he will. I'll be sitting down with him for the 40th anniversary of that series. I'll be talking to him, so we'll post that in the very near future. I'm recording it this week, and by the time we do our next episode, I'll let you know when and where you'll be able to find it. So keep your eyes peeled for that. But that's all the time we've had for now, and we look forward to talking to everybody next month. So you read Kang, we'll talk to you about Kang. So you keep reading him, we'll keep talking about him, and we'll see you next time here in the Geekscape Book Club. Thanks, everybody.